Today is September 21, 2014, and you're listening to Comm Chatter Off Duty. I'm Alderin, and with me, as always, is Colonel Pixley. Not a colonel right now, though, but he will explain why he's a colonel later in the episode.
Okay.
In character, of course.
Yeah. I'm just regular Pixley right now.
There's not a whole lot in the way of news today, but Pixley came up with this big discussion about character creation, so it's basically a Pixley day. I've got like one line in this entire thing here.
Yeah.
Once we actually get into the discussion.
Yeah. Well, we should really have an episode where you do a bunch of talking, because it seems like all the episodes where one person does a bunch of talking, it's me. We should spread the load.
So today, there's a cool fan project that needs your help getting made. We've had some ideas for archaic ships. And Pixley, mostly, will be talking about character creation.
Yay! Bringing the show back to role-playing, rather than just regurgitating news.
Indeed. All this and more after the jump. So Pixley, what have you been up to lately?
Well, I mean, I had Legante sleep on my couch for no reason. No, I'm just kidding. For those of you who follow Galactic Inquiry might know, they've been pushing the concept of bar citizen, where, citizens get together, meet up at a bar and, have drinks and hang out. Well, because Galactic Inquiry and CIG Austin are in, Austin, we had a big old meetup yesterday. Yesterday being the 20th of September. And we had a really good time. Legante came down from his place, crashed at mine, and we had a good old time. Legante, Kinshadow, Wingman, Mike Moreland, myself, and a whole bunch of other people whose names escape me. But, a really good group of people. I had a very good time at the Flying Saucer. And then, after everyone left, Kinshadow, Legante, and I hung out for a little bit and had some sodas. Talked a bit. I got there around 1:40. I didn't get back to my apartment until 8. So, it was a really good day. And if you live in a major kind of area, you should go on to the fan meetups section on the forums and see if there's a bar citizen near you. I mean, obviously, unless you live in one of the CIG places, you're probably not going to be able to hang out with devs, but, the community's cool people too. I would know. I'm part of the community.
Yeah, I'd like to go to one of those at some point, but the nearest regular one that I'm aware of is in New York City, which is between an 8 and 12, depending on how you drive, hour drive away. Although there might be one on the other side of the border, but I don't have a passport or whatever you need to go across these days. It's
passport.
I've not been to Canada since you just needed an ID.
Yeah. What happened, Canada? I thought we were bros. Not that it matters to me. I do have a passport.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but you're in Texas.
Yeah. Well, I went to Vancouver a few years ago. I was there for less than 24 hours, but I went to Vancouver.
I could walk to Canada. That's how close I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could not walk to Mexico. I'm not that far south in Texas.
Yeah, I wish I just had something to do. This new job's been kind of killer on my life. I don't think I've really done much for the last few months. Although, fortunately, it's allowed me to upgrade my computer, and I think I'm finally done upgrading for a little while anyway. Just ordered myself a GTX 760 4GB model because of the price drop, with Maxwell coming out.
Yep. Those are some sexy cards.
At the time I bought it, it was about $50 off. So if you're looking into upgrading, now might be a good time. Some people might think it's better off waiting till till the 960 drops, but hey, my current card is crap. I don't feel like waiting or paying for the 970.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a 760 to hold me over until closer to Star Citizen's launch anyway. And at that point, I'll probably get dual 970s or something. Something
They're
to
really-
do with an Oculus Rift. Because apparently SLI is going to make VR really good with these new NVIDIA cards.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I'll get into the Rift myself. I get motion sick kind of easy for some reason. Never used to, but I'm probably going to go with Track IR, just more convenient for me. But enough about that.
Yeah. Let's move on to
You
the
got
news.
There's not really all that much news, but the one bit we have is amazing.
It is. I want one.
Me too. I've still got a whole bunch of them. There is a Lego Hornet being voted on to make into an official Lego product. Last I knew, we were about, I think it was 1,200 votes away.
I looked on the subreddit this morning, and I think we're sub 900 away now. So, yeah, we're really close.
Yeah.
I mean, I doubt the entirety of our viewership would, or viewership/listenership would make up that difference, but, every bit helps.
Yeah, I mean, besides, if you don't vote for one, I can't buy one.
Yep. You don't vote for
more
it, no one
things-
buys it.
More things to waste my money on.
Yeah, but it's on Lego Ideas. I'll have the link in the description. So that's the news.
Yep.
All of the news.
Much news.
Many topic.
And
Wow.
okay, so before we get into the character creation, like I said earlier, we had an idea. As we've seen, or at least speculate, there are older models of ships that will be made. For example, the Constellation we now have is the Mark III variant. So about the Mark I and Mark II. The Hornet is 400 years old. It's gone through upgrades. What about the older ones that haven't gone upgraded, or might have been at old Messer-era bases that were abandoned when he fell? What about the same for Gladius, and perhaps, like, the RSI Zeus? It would just be really interesting finding, or being able to buy these old model ships, even if they're not quite up to the standards of, like, current ones. But I'm willing to bet some of them would have benefits over modern. For example, perhaps durability at the cost of efficiency and just raw power? What do you think?
I mean, I certainly think it would be like hot collector's items because, like,
Oh, yeah, of course.
like only have a finite amount of them. So yeah, those would certainly fetch a pretty penny. I'm not entirely sold on like the benefits thing because, like, I mean, if they're old, they probably aren't in great condition. So I mean, their
Well-
durability would probably be lower, I would
Well,
think.
yeah, I mean, just being old doesn't mean it has to be worn out. It could just basically left the factory and just sat there, like in a hangar somewhere. but
Theoretically.
I mean, it's just coming from, the saying, they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah.
And I've seen, whether or not you want to, whether or not you agree with that, it does have some merits. I mean, not too long ago, my mother's computer only just went up. It was 10 years old. The fans have been dead in it for years. The heat sinks are dinky little things. It didn't have, like, the solid caps like we have nowadays. It took just 10 years of complete abuse to die. When I know people have had modern computers that they barely push, just fry.
Yeah. I don't know. Have
Who
to
knows?
see.
I mean, we still have that old, the old Hornet models floating around somewhere.
Indeed, we do.
It'd be kind of nice seeing those up-resed and stuck into the game as the older models. And I think there were actually 2 or 3 variants of those, like as far back as the original trailer
Yeah.
for Kickstarter.
Yeah, and like there was kind of an intermediate model early last year, I recall. It would make sense for like progression because like you do see the progression from the original trailer Hornet to the one early last year to the current model we have. We'll really just have to see. Seems like a logical progression to me.
Another thing would be what if people preferred the style of the older models. I mean, I know when they upgraded the Hornet to its current model, the one we have in our hangars in Arena Commander now, there weren't a ton of people, but there were some that were complaining about how they liked the older ones better. I mean, I know you'll get people complaining about anything they can, but I can
Yeah.
understand why.
Yeah, well, I mean, the current Hornets don't have. Do they have the pop-out screens still, or did they like totally remove those?
I don't know. I don't have one.
Well, I don't have one either, but I mean, certainly not as much of a feature of the cockpit as they were in the original. That's for sure, because all the HUDs floating in front of your helmet now. So actually, that would be interesting. Like the older models, you don't have your 3D HUDs. You like have to actually, look down, look around to actually see what you need to.
Yeah, or perhaps you could also, assuming they aren't too expensive or valuable as they are, maybe you could retrofit them with some more modern equipment, like give them a modern power plant and thrusters or something.
Yeah.
Kind of keep the quote unquote retro feel.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, people do it with cars now.
Yeah.
I mean, and the most important thing to me about it is that, putting in, older models of the ships in the game, makes the universe more alive, because, like, it's not like, all the ships suddenly started appearing, 29, 43, 44, 45, like, they have there's a long progression going on there. I mean, obviously with, like, the Gladius and the Idris, those are retired ships. So, you wouldn't see too many of those having, like, previous iterations necessarily. But, the Hornet, certainly, and, the Connie's Mark 1s and Mark 2s.
The Retaliators. Because I don't remember what it was, if it was just in the comm link, or if it was on the ship specs page or whatever, but apparently the original versions were very different than what we're going to get.
Oh, interesting. Why can't I just see them?
They didn't specify, but in lore they're supposed to be very, very different. I don't know if anyone ever has looked at some military planes, but I think the way we'd think of the Retaliator would be like a B-52. That sound good? And if you look at an original B-52, it is very, very different than what we have now. It came with, I think it was turboprops and straight wings, and originally it was like just a really big, old-fashioned bomber, similar to what you have seen in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Because it came around right after. Nowadays, it looks just as advanced as any other big military jets. If you put an original and a modern one side by side, a lot of people probably wouldn't realize they were the same thing, both a B-52.
Mm.
And even then, there's different variants in between.
Well, yeah, of course. They're like F-15 A through E. You've got the single-seater and dual-seater versions of the F-16.
Yeah, I doubt we'll see, like, old variants, like a Constellation Mark I Phoenix or whatever.
Yeah, that would be a bit much.
Maybe some ships that could have, like, one variant of the aged design, but...
Yeah, I think that would be most reasonable.
For the most part, I think take the base models and get the old versions or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hell, with the Connie Mark II, you could just take the old Connie Mark III design and make that the Connie Mark II.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you'd still have to come up with something for the Connie Mark I, because...
Yeah. I'd really be interested in that, because, call me crazy, but I do like the RSI style.
You're crazy. No, I mean, each manufacturer has a really good style. I mean, yeah, they're all different. They're all really good.
I can't wait to see the Orion. But enough on that. I think there's been enough speculation and idea crafting or whatever.
Yeah.
Should probably get on to the main feature of today's show.
Me! Wait, what? No. Me talking about stuff. That's what the main feature of the show is. So, no one's asked for it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And what I'm going to talk about today is creating a character, because I believe that Comm Chatter Off Duty should be about, trying to promote role-playing. Figure I should try to do some of that, considering the only other time we did that was episode 2. And that was probably our best episode of Off Duty thus far.
Yeah, definitely. Wasn't that the one that's like got us noticed by CIG?
That was indeed the one that got us noticed by CIG.
Still, thinking back on it, it still amazes me that we got that. But
Yeah.
moving on.
I'm just going to preface all this by saying, this is the stuff I know. It is not an end-all, be-all guide to creating a character. There are plenty of other valid methods. These are just the ones I'm aware of and that I can actually talk about at length. So, to start off, there are basically 3 different methods that I know of that you could go with. The first of which is taking your personality, character, whatnot, and then just, transplanting it from 2014 to 2944, like, Alderin did.
Yeah, for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
Like, as I am now, I doubt I'd be in a cockpit shooting at pirates.
Yeah.
But, I'd probably be more staying on a planet or just doing something a little safer.
You'd just still be in the middle of nowhere in New York. That's what it would be.
Yeah. Yeah,
But,
probably.
I mean, yeah, obviously that's more of a launching point than anything else. The second launching point method is what I use for the kernel, is you start with an archetype and kind of build up from there. My initial concept for the kernel actually came about back when Notch was doing Hex 10 to the C, or Trillic, or... That really should have gotten an official pronunciation, and never did.
It was the sort of dungeon game, right?
No, it was the one where, like, a bunch of people got shot out into space in, like, the 80s, and, like, their spaceship computers were, like, this 16-bit architecture, and they got the Endianness wrong, so your stasis prod woke you up billions of years in the future. Maybe in trillions, I don't remember. But you're still, like, slightly alternate universe 1984 technology. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a bounty hunter of sorts, like, fighting bad elements. And then that game kind of fell apart because Notch lost excitement and, Star Citizen was announced. I'm like, ooh, this game will be fun. So, same overarching setting in space. So, a bounty hunting thing. Actually, I didn't really call it bounty hunting. I called it being a vigilante. I wanted to be a vigilante. And so I took that, kind of started forming a thing. I didn't really have the role-playing component of it yet. That's just what I wanted to do. And then, as I mentioned back in episode 2, kind of inspired to put it together as like a role-playing character by Stars Oratoria and the likes of Legante and Kinshadow because of their videos, and then just, my experience playing Pathfinder and Dungeons & Dragons. Because I knew I wanted to fight pirates. Because, that's what a space vigilante does, essentially. Fights pirates and slavers. And basically from there I just like, well, I mean, you gotta make them interesting. I mean, you can't really tell a story with a character if you don't have an interesting character. Mass Effect would be nothing if all your squad mates weren't really interesting people. Well, almost all of them. I mean, obviously, certain ones are less interesting than others, but, overall, very strong characters. And you gotta have very strong characters to tell a good story, I think. And, storytelling is what role-playing's about, in my opinion. So, I built them up from there, and I'll get into, the specifics of the building up from there. But, basically, just starting with an archetype, what you want to do. And then the third launching point, which is what I'm going to go into detail because I think it's the best for beginners, is the pen and paper method. So, the pen and paper method, basically, you have, kind of an idea of what you want to do, but you don't really have a personality behind it yet. Let's say, for example, you want to make a pirate. But there are all sorts of pirates out there. They're, big, hulking, intimidating pirates. There are smooth-talking pirates. There are pirates that are just really good pilots, and, they're silent. You say something to them over the comm, and, they never say anything back, but they're, really good pilots. You have pirates that stalk their prey, waiting for the exact right moment. Just pirate. That's such a broad term. That's really not enough to build a character off of. So, what happens in D&D and Pathfinder is you roll your attributes. And in Star Citizen's case, obviously, it's based off player skill than rolls, so obviously you roll low strength score, that's not necessarily going to impact your ability in FPS or whatever, because you're good at FPS as a player. But it can influence what your character likes to do. So, the way I roll my characters in Pathfinder is 4d6 minus the lowest, and ability scores or attributes range from 3, which is the lowest, to 18, the highest, and then, the modifiers that can be built off there. But, for, level 1, fresh character, 3 to 18, with 10 or 11 being kind of the average. So I like to roll it. Some hardcore people roll 3d6. They don't take away the lowest. Some people do 3d6 in order, which, can result in some very interesting characters because you really don't know what you're going to get. Whereas, I roll 46 minus low and then assign the ones I want. Now, as an example, I'm going to use the Colonel, but I didn't roll his stats. These are just like my estimations on what his stats would be, just based upon the character I've created thus far. And also, really, mental attributes are probably more important than physical attributes for Star Citizen, because it's more about personality, I think. Unless, there are certain things, like, a pilot would be more dexterous. A mercenary on the ground, like a Marine, would probably have higher strength or constitution. But, yeah, we can go through them. So, the 6 stats in D&D 3.5 and Pathfinder are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma, which should be all fairly self-explanatory. So, for Strength, the Colonel doesn't really have that much interest in fighting on the ground. He may not be really that strong. He's not weak by any standard, but, he's probably like 11, thereabouts, pretty average. He's not really involved in infantry-type combat. He's a pilot. That's his thing. So as a pilot, his dexterity would be higher, because, you have to be really good on the controls. So he probably has like a 16 or 17. Ideally, he'd be an 18, but I don't consider myself nearly good enough to claim an 18. 16 is probably a bit high for how not good I am an arena commander as of now. Now, granted, there are some control issues as of now. But, in the case of Constitution, I can't say it'd be all that relevant to Star Citizen. Yeah. Not really, I don't think. If someone wants to show, like, hey, I have an idea what Constitution would be important for in Star Citizen, feel free to tell me, but I couldn't think of anything, and I spent quite a lot of time on this. Intelligence. The Colonel has pretty good intelligence, maybe about a 14, and this is partially because he's played by me, and not to... I don't mean to be a braggart, but I consider myself a pretty smart guy. And, Sorry?
Nothing.
Well, okay, well, now I'm going to go back and listen to it while I edit, and we'll find out what you said about me.
Okay, that's fine.
Anyway, so, because kind of limited, I just always use a pretty good vocabulary, and I have difficulty bringing it back down to, like, how an everyday person would talk. Colonel would have, in that case, have pretty high intelligence. And being a fighter pilot's pretty mentally demanding. Back when my dad was a fighter pilot, his coworkers and he are all pretty smart dudes. They have to be able to tell relative trajectories, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot to process at once, and you have to be pretty smart. Not necessarily, like, really good at math or science or something. My dad never got past calculus. But, he's a pretty smart dude. And going back to the Colonel, he does also try to keep up with the news. So, I consider that something, smart people try to do. But, obviously not, like, really, really smart. He's not a programmer or a scientist or, any other type of smart there is. Obviously there are many different types of smart. But. So going on to wisdom, now this is going to be the Colonel's weakest stat, and I'm estimating it around an 8, because he's really bad with his money. He blew all his money on a 325A, and, has the little scraps he gets from doing pick and shield work to like barely pay the rent for the hangar and barely pay for food. He's not really careful about that. He doesn't think things through. He's impulsive. He can be a little irascible, like in the last Comm Chatter episode when Alderin used a bit of poor terminology. The Colonel pounced on him on the idea that he was interpreting it the way he had said, not the way he intended. And also the Colonel, instead of, going for like a safer civilian type piloting job, like maybe flying some sort of people transport ship or a cargo ship, like something safer within UEE space, he went to go fight pirates. And, that's part of his prerogative to, like, do something good. But, it's risky and it's not necessarily financially sound. So, again, low wisdom thing. And then finally, charisma. I'd say the Colonel has pretty good charisma. Like, like intelligence, about 14. He's not, like, super attractive, like, physically. And he can be a little more reserved. And that's probably just a limitation of the person playing him, because I'm not that social guy. But, he is supposed to be an effective commander and will speak his opinion and talk fairly elaborately and communicate effectively. So, maybe not like traditionally high charisma, because, if you have a sorcerer or a bard in Pathfinder or D&D, they're more forward. They're using their bluff and they're intimidating stuff. The Colonel, tries to be intimidating sometimes, but the Colonel's not the sort of person who, to try and get past some guards, would, like, paint himself green and dress in only a feather boa, saying, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, guys, I know I was out late, I need to use the bathroom," like, that sort of thing. He wouldn't do that. He's not that sort of person, but, he is, or he tries to be a leader. I try to make him one. Yeah, that's attributes. Alright, everybody, we're going to take a small intermission, and when we come back, our discussion on character creation will continue. You are listening to Comm Chatter Off Duty. And closely tied attributes are skills. What is your character good at? And again, Pathfinder and D&D have a really good framework for this by listing just a bunch of kind of general, but specific enough where you can say like any of the specific skills that would fall under this pretty closely related, so you would know all these. So like I guess I'll just run through the list. So appraise, pretty obvious. You're able to accurately determine, if you're good at appraisal, you're able to accurately determine the value of something. That would be good for pirates and traders and people who are doing resources like mining. Like miners have to be able to determine like whether this particular type of ore is worth going after. And then bluff, not even always lying, but not necessarily telling direct lies, like being a really good liar, but being able to fool people into believing ridiculous things. So like going back to the green painted feather boa example, that is bluff. Or like going up to the enemy base and just knocking on their door. That's bluff. That's a really useful skill for the sort of people who use it, and it's good for pirates and smugglers. I mean, smugglers have to be able to weasel their way out of being caught. That's bluff. And then infiltrators, obviously, if someone's trying to infiltrate something, obviously they have to have a good cover story and being able to make sure that all the quote-unquote facts they give are consistent. That's bluff. And then you've got craft, which craft is very general. In Pathfinder D&D, like, you say craft, and then you give a certain type of item, like craft armor, craft weapons, craft wind instruments, that sort of thing. But, that would be something for resource-type people or engineers, which I can't say that much about because I don't keep up with that sort of thing other than Pig and Shield wants to do mining. And that's about it. Not really a lot of crafting going on there. And then you've got diplomacy, which is negotiation. That's really good for traders if they want to get a good deal on what they're buying or what they're selling. That's diplomacy. Bounty hunters, when they're trying to get someone to come with them alive rather than having to kill them and get a lower reward, or maybe negotiating the reward. Like, hey, I killed this guy, but got him for you. You really need this guy taken care of. Like, maybe I could get the alive reward instead of the dead reward. That's diplomacy. And then mercenaries, for that a little bit. And then they're trying to ward someone off like, hey, I really don't want to get in a fight with you right now. Leave my client alone. That sort of thing. Disable device. This isn't necessarily something we know too much about in regards to Star Citizen. It's more like hacking than necessarily like lockpicking or other such things that would apply to in Pathfinder. Hacking type stuff, that would be good for pirates and on larger ships, the person at the electronic warfare station. You've got disguise. That's one of my favorites in terms of Pathfinder. I mean, the Colonel's not really a disguisey type fellow. I mean, he would loudly announce his presence, and that ties back to the low wisdom thing. But disguise is really good for piracy. You don't want to fly in a cutlass with skull and crossbones on it. You want to be able to disguise your ship and your intentions. I mean, disguising your intentions is more bluff, but being able to disguise your intentions starts with disguising who you are. If you're ordinarily, obviously a pirate, people would want to stay away from you. And then bounty hunting, like some say bounty hunters got a target on Spider. They don't want to walk onto Spider looking obviously like a UEE sanctioned bounty hunter. That would not end well for them. They have to blend in with the crowd. And same thing for infiltration. Someone trying to infiltrate a major organization would not want to necessarily be dressed in their true organization's uniform, if organization uniforms are a thing, which, by the way, CIG, I would love organization uniforms. Just saying. Fly. Now, flying, that's really a skill that applies to basically everybody, except for the small subset of people who only want to do, like, ground-based FPS stuff, which, perfectly valid way to play the game. I don't judge them, but for every other person, whether or not you're a good pilot is going to influence how you play the game. Obviously, racing and small ship-to-small ship combat, fighters, that's going to be, like, really where whether or not your fly skill is very good comes into play. Obviously, I'm not that good at the game yet, but ideally, when the game goes live, I will be good enough for it. One of the Colonel's good skills would be fly. After fly is intimidate. In case you haven't noticed by now, I'm going in alphabetical order. Intimidate. So that is obviously something for pirates and bounty hunters and mercenaries. And I really shouldn't even have to explain intimidation. Although, it should be noted that it's a charisma-based skill. You gotta have good charisma to intimidate someone. I mean, you could be the biggest, hulkiest guy you want, but if you're someone like me, like real-life me, I just because I'm not very charismatic, I'm not a very social person, and I'm ordinarily a really nice person. I try to be anyway. It comes across very humorous when I try to be intimidating. Throughout my entire high school career, my friends would make fun of me, like I couldn't do an evil laugh, like I just didn't have it in me. I mean, I've practiced just because evil laughs are fun to have, but you have to be somewhat charismatic to pull off intimidation. I mean, obviously it helps when you're big and hulky and you're missing an eye or have this wicked scar, like you should see the other guy type thing going on. Otherwise, you really have to be able to play against the other person's personality. You have to be perceptive, you have to understand how social interaction works. You have to be charismatic. That's charisma. And I intend for the Colonel to be able to intimidate. Like, that's something I need to work on, because he's a pretty violent person, and I'll get into that in a bit. Alright, moving on. Next one is knowledge, which there are all kinds of knowledge. Knowledge is not a catch-all skill. There's knowledge religion, knowledge local, knowledge nature, knowledge arcana. I mean, those are obviously the last one. Not going to apply to Star Citizen, but like knowledge science or something like that. Knowledge. Character's bound to know a lot about something. If they're an interesting character. Interesting characters know a lot about something. I haven't decided what the Colonel knows a lot about yet. I mean, I guess he would know a lot about the military. I guess ships. But unfortunately right now we don't know enough about the ships because, you know, everything's subject to change, and I really hesitate to give specifics on ship stats on the show, because then that dates the show, and I want, other than maybe earlier shows are bad, I would like people to go back and listen to our backlog when the game goes live. Anyway, moving on. Linguistics, that's not necessarily a skill that would ever necessarily be useful. I mean, CIG is developing languages for the Banu Xi'an. That will be a thing, but it's not necessarily so much as a skill that your character would be able to effectively utilize necessarily.
Although,
go ahead.
Now it might not be common, but I think they did say you may be able to pick up like tidbits walking around. You know, like you can overhear people talking.
Yeah.
So it might, and you know, that may not be in English. It might be in Xi'an or Banu.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be a good thing for you, and therefore your character to have.
Yeah, so I guess like more of a spy infiltration type person could.
Yeah, that
use
or just
yeah.
Or hey, there's a good asteroid field here.
Yeah.
Or something. Now.
I mean, it would definitely be good for explorers. Like they hear about a supposed jump point that hadn't been mapped by the UEE. Yeah. Go and find that. And
explorers, maybe salvagers.
Yeah.
Potentially pirates could talk in it, because maybe people wouldn't understand it. Although I doubt there'll be many people talking like Xi'an.
Yeah.
Or wait, is it Xi'an or Jean? I keep forgetting.
Xi'an, I believe, is the official pronunciation.
Whatever. Carry on.
Well, now we've discovered the utility. Thank you, Alderin. It is certainly interesting. I've always maintained that people who know multiple languages are really interesting people. I try to be interesting in my attempts to learn Japanese, but knowing the Xi'an or Banu common language, I would seriously doubt if the Xi'an language were just called Xi'an, because that would be kind of lame. Like, if you decide you want your character to know language, that's something interesting about them. And like, personally, I think it'd be cool to learn Xi'an, because I think the Xi'an are pretty cool. I don't know if I'm gonna have the Colonel necessarily be that cool on it. I mean, I know in the final episode of Stars Oratorio that I was on, I gave the Xi'an traditional greeting. So maybe I may roll with that, I may not. But, I mean, it's certainly a way to make your character more interesting. And, again, interesting characters, what this is all about. Alrighty, moving on. Perception. This is a very important skill for pretty much everyone, being able to tell what's going on. Seeing things that aren't necessarily obvious. I mean, this is more of a player skill than anything else in this kind of game. You can play your character to your ability of whether or not you notice things. So, like, and it's certainly valuable in exploration. You gotta be able to see those jump points. And piracy, bounty hunting, or scouting, being able to see those tiny ships way off in the distance. Obviously, you have to be able to see as a player, but I feel like something interesting can be built off of it. I wish I could come up with a good example, but I can't. Alright, next up is Profession. Another one of those multi-faceted skills where you, like, pick one. Obviously, the Colonel and other people in Pick and Shield would have Profession Mining, or would gain Profession Mining over the course of their career. I mean, the Colonel just kind of brings anyone in who wants to fight pirates, and he really doesn't know a lot about mining yet. Mostly because we, as players, don't know a lot about mining yet. But part of the story of Pick and Shield is that they learn to mine, learn to be self-sufficient while also providing service at a stupidly low cost. Hopefully, eventually, like, actually accrue enough money to make a difference. That's, like, my goal with the story of Pick and Shield, and the Colonel specifically. You know, all sorts of professions, and basically any label you could assign to an org right now is probably a profession. Piloting, not so much because that falls more into fly. But salvaging, that could be a profession. That sort of thing. Next up is Sleight of Hand. That's for, like, pickpocketing and hiding stuff on your person. That's really a good thing for pirates and smugglers. Smuggling and pirates being able to pickpocket, that sort of thing. Stealth is pretty good across the board. Infiltration, piracy, smuggling, bounty hunting. Gotta be able to get away from people. Gotta be able to fly into the asteroid field and hide. Your character has to be able to know about that, like, where are good places to hide? What modifications do you make to your ship's power to make it so your EM emissions are low, but you're also, if things really go south, you're able to quickly get everything back up and ready to fight and try and boost away.
Yeah, and even then, if it's not like the run and hide type, it's like the blending in type as well.
Pirate waiting in an asteroid field to ambush somebody, that's stealth.
Yeah, and if you're going to, like, scope out a place to raid it for whatever reason, you're not going to be walking around with full, like, armor, rifle, and all that on. You'll be walking around in probably civilian clothing.
Yeah.
Just taking brief glances or whatever.
Yeah, KC mode in Payday 2 is a really good example of that sort of thing you were just talking about there. I don't know if you played Payday 2, but that's a good game.
I've seen bits and pieces.
Yeah. For those of you listening, I fully endorse Payday 2. If Overkill Software would pay us, I would endorse Payday 2 every single day. Just kidding.
Just don't go after the people we escort.
Yeah. And then finally, survival. Survival in Star Citizen is quite a lot different from survival in Pathfinder or something, because you're not really all that much in the wilderness. Or if you are, you're not really a player character, because I mean, if you're in the wilderness, you're like the sort of person who's colonizing a new planet or something.
Unless there's always the opportunity you could get, like, shot down or something, and your only chance to escape may be, like, some uninhabited planets. And maybe you have to survive until you're rescued or something.
Okay, that would be really cool. But other than that, it's about managing your resources while you're out in space. I mean, obviously you don't have an infinite amount of food. I mean, I don't think food's going to be an issue in game. But again, for interesting role-playing, you should have time cut out of your character's schedule to eat, sleep, and drink. I mean, sleeping, obviously, best done when you're logged off. But, you know,
yeah, think of like DayZ, where you have to eat and drink and stuff. And then there's also a slightly lesser-known game, The Ship, where you have to actually, you know, do everything: eat, sleep, and keep clean.
Oh wow!
Basically, you live.
Yeah.
You just do everything you would do on a daily basis and try not to die.
Yeah.
Try not to get killed.
Yeah. And the other thing about survival in Star Citizen is being able to, like, navigate asteroid fields or other cosmic phenomena. And also, in survival, I would put, you know, navigation of jump points for the very first time. If you're an explorer and you find a jump point, there's a lot of skill involved in being able to traverse the jump point to its actual destination, lest you be spat out someplace completely different or even worse. So that's definitely something worth considering as you create your character. Last thing to consider when choosing skills is that, I mean, obviously you can't do the exact point distribution, because, like, really, in tabletop games, you roll to determine whether you succeed at your skills, whereas in Star Citizen, you don't have that sort of thing. It's all you as the player. So, you really just decide what you are and aren't good at. And you could say your character's good at everything, but that's not an interesting character. That's a Mary Sue or a Gary Stu, as it were. You really want to limit yourself to, like, a handful of things that your character's good at. I think a pretty decent rule, like, for every 2 points above 10 you have in your intelligence attribute, you get another skill. So, like, you're at 10 or 11, you have 1 skill that you're really good at. 12 or 13, 2, 14, 15, 3, and so on. Your character really shouldn't be good at everything. That's just uninteresting and ridiculous. Character has to have limits. I mean, interesting characters are where they circumvent their limits to accomplish their objectives, rather than just having no limits. Be very careful about that. It's a very easy trap to fall into, like, oh, yeah, I'm best liar, I'm the best negotiator, I'm the most intimidating person, I can sneak everywhere, I can determine what anybody's thinking. Oh, actually, speaking of determining what everybody's thinking, I think I mentioned sense motive. Sense motive is where you, like, determine whether someone's being genuine about the things they're saying or their demeanor. Like, if with sense motive you're able to perceive whether they're just, like, sitting there, a normal person, or, like, they're sitting there, like, visibly worried about something. Another charisma-based skill, but actually no, that's a wisdom-based skill. Sorry. Alright, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will finish up our talk on character creation. You are listening to Comm Chatter Off Duty. Now we move away from, like, the more mechanical stuff that have to take the mechanics out and just kind of abstract it, just like stuff that was already abstract. So, and these are where the really interesting stuff comes. So, first off, and this is like the only one of these that's like actually codified in D&D and Pathfinder, and that's alignment. Now, obviously, in a universe where good and evil aren't absolutes like they are in Pathfinder and D&D, where they have, like, deities personifying it, magic powers that are powered by whether you're good or not. Paladins, for example, they don't get their powers if they're not good and lawful. It is certainly a good, like, starting point. Again, this is all a starting point. There are many different alignment systems for the different tabletop games, and I'm just going to go with classic D&D Pathfinder type one, because they have the same alignment system, because Pathfinder's based on D&D. There are 2 axes that end up having 9 alignments total. So you have the law versus chaos axis, where, like, lawful characters adhere to a strict code, and depending on whether they fall under the influence of government, they follow that government. Or, like, in Pathfinder or D&D, they follow a king or something. And then chaotic people celebrate their freedom more. They're, like, not as beholden to authority, kind of just go do what they feel best. And then on the other axis is good versus evil, which good people are nice and, oh, not necessarily nice. I mean, you could have a mean good person, like certain extremist type paladin types. Altruistic, helpful, defending the weak, that sort of thing. Evil people take advantage of others, do not altruistic things, steal, cheat, lie, that sort of thing. I mean, lying is really more a law versus chaos thing than good versus evil, as it's codified in D&D and Pathfinder. They hurt people, they hurt the innocent, they take slaves, that sort of thing. That's evil. I mean, obviously, you could argue that sort of thing all day long. You know, I'm just giving, like, kind of general examples, and you can argue whether something's on the good versus evil, law versus chaos axis, and things being relative in the Star Citizen universe. Very much up for debate. But again, this is just an overview and a starting point. So lawful good would be like the prototypical paladin, like defender of the weak, super honorable, only fights people if they're armed, always tries to fight a fair fight. I mean, obviously that's like kind of extreme, but you gotta use the extreme examples to like kind of get the point across. And then neutral good, not so hung up on the honor thing, but still good to people. And then chaotic good people, which I would consider the Colonel be chaotic good because he doesn't really have all that much regard for the UEE. Now, you could argue that since he's trying to like have a pretty solid structure for pick and shield, yeah, he probably has some like lawful elements to him. But as a person in the way he behaves, he doesn't really care about drug use. Not really hung up on slavers necessarily, unless slavers are going out their way to attack people and kidnap them, then he has a problem with it. But he kind of operates outside the law, and because he's operating outside the bounds of where the law is. But he's not trying to enforce any law, he's just trying to protect people, and that's good instead of lawful, so I consider him chaotic good. And then back to lawful neutral. So neutral's neither good nor bad, like they have good elements and bad elements, but overall, just a lawful neutral person is just kind of maintaining orderliness, and that's very much the UEE. Like, the UEE isn't good, they're not bad. I mean, you could argue that the Messer era UEE was lawful evil, and you'd probably be right. The UEE, as it stands now, is very likely lawful neutral. And then you have true neutral, where the person's not necessarily concerned with protecting people or going out of their way to hurt people, take advantage of them, and they're not really concerned about like honor or freedom. They're just kind of in the middle. It's a very difficult alignment to define, and a lot of people like to call it wishy-washy. I mean, I feel like there are good ways to characterize true neutral. It's a very difficult alignment to characterize correctly, I think. And I've never played a true neutral character. I always try to lean towards good ones. And they've got chaotic neutral, which, that would be most pirates. Because, I mean, except for, like, the really sadistic ones, pirates are really just kind of out for themselves. They'll hurt people, but they're not doing it for the sake of hurting them or for the sake of taking advantage of them. They're doing it just to make a living, as they would argue. They're not, like, plotting to dominate people. They're just making their way. I mean, obviously there are evil pirates. That's certainly not out of the question. Kin Shadow, for instance, probably chaotic neutral. I mean, I guess I could ask him, probably. But he's probably chaotic neutral. And the same could probably be said for Savalin. The dump and jump thing is a little evil, I think. So maybe, I don't know. We'll see. He'll probably comment, saying whether or not he considers himself chaotic neutral or chaotic evil. And then, flipping back again to the lawful side, you've got lawful evil, which those are like evil empire type things. So again, the Messer era UEE or the Galactic Empire in Star Wars. That is lawful evil right there. If you're at all familiar with those, you know exactly how lawful evil works. They dominate through order, that sort of thing. And then neutral evil, again, they're not necessarily concerned with order, but they're not chaotic either. So they're kind of just in the middle. They're just taking advantage of people, doing bad stuff, but not really to an end that is like some kind of domination or like anarchy type thing. It's more middle of the road. And then you have chaotic evil, which very much anarchy, Wanton destruction very much personifies it, and the Vandal are almost certainly chaotic evil, or at least the ones the UE's familiar with. I mean, obviously, if they're more Vandal we've never seen before, and these are like outcasts for their chaotic evil ways, then hey, I'd like to meet those. But the Vandal we're familiar with are almost certainly chaotic evil. Very much wanton destruction, just killing people for the sake of it, just all sorts of nasty business. Definitely like the least desirable of alignments. So, yeah. And again, I can't give really general examples. So, but picking one of those will definitely give you a good idea as to your character's opinions and morality and view on the world. That's really something worth thinking about. So, one thing I forgot to mention while I was talking about alignment in the original recording is that your character has to be the hero of their own story. So even if they are evil, anyone else would say they are evil, dirty, rotten bastard. Your character has to think in their mind that they are the good guy. They have to have motivations that effectively communicate that, and this next part will kind of go into that a little, but the important thing is your character has to believe they're the hero. So the rest of these aren't codified. These are just things I think make for interesting characters. Your character has to have a goal, or some goal in their life, or some sort of aspiration. Even something simple, like, I've heard this example used before in the case of role-playing, and I think it's a really good example. Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride. He just wants to avenge his father's death, and he goes to the ends of the earth to find the man who killed him. And yeah, that's really basic and really archetypical. Again, vocabulary thing. Something as basic as that can really lead to an interesting story. I mean, obviously, in Star Citizen, you can't do something as specific as, like, the Six-Fingered Man, or Vandal Scythe with 3 blades. Like, I doubt CIG would accommodate that, but you gotta have something your character's working towards. Colonel, for instance, his goal isn't so much an end as a mean. The Colonel's goal is to put his skills to work doing something useful and productive for society, at least in his opinion. Like, the only thing he considered himself good at is flying fighter craft. That's what he's really good at, and he's not really good at anything else. So he wants to put that to use, and there's not a lot else to put that to use besides fighting Vandal than fighting pirates. So that's what he does. Your character's relationships are always also worth noting. I mean, if you have friends in the game, obviously you have a relationship with those, and if you want to do a role-playing thing, then you have to find a reason why all you and your friends' characters are all friends in universe. And that can prove difficult. My brother is a backer for Star Citizen. He's not really interested in the anti-piracy thing. He just more kind of wants to go it alone, and as far as I can tell, he wants nothing to do with Pick and Shield. That's fine. I mean, kind of sucks I don't get to play with my brother that much, but if you can't get it to work, don't force it. Nothing less interesting than a bunch of characters who have no business being together. If you have people that don't necessarily like each other but are together out of circumstance, or just because they work together well functionally, if not relationship-wise, like dwarves and elves. Dwarves and elves don't like each other, but if they have skills that complement each other, they'll eventually come to respect each other, even if they don't like each other. Like, dwarf still doesn't like the elf, but he recognizes that the elf is good at what he does, and the dwarf would be lost without the elf. Like, would not be nearly as a good position. So, you really gotta think of relationships. And as for the Colonel, when he founded Pick and Shield, he had just come out of the military. He didn't really know any people outside, and he had gotten divorced, so any ties he had through his ex-wife, those are gone now. Like, he has his kids, or kid, I haven't decided how many kids he has. But he has them, and they're important to him. But otherwise, his entire social life is Pick and Shield. Despite that seeming kind of lame, you know, that influences him. Does he try to get to know more people outside of Pick and Shield? I mean, obviously, he's acquaintances with a pirate now. He doesn't like that pirate. It's like the elf and the dwarf thing again. He knows that person now, and he'll come to expand his relationships as the story develops, as the persistent universe comes into play, and as Comm Chatter goes on. Good characters are dynamic, they change. The Colonel's goals may change as the persistent universe goes on. And that's good. I mean, I don't see that right now, because what I want to do is fight pirates. So, we'll see. Something else comes up that like, I find is really interesting, then, yeah. Next thing, backstory. Obviously, you can't do a lot with it right now, because, like, the lore isn't nearly solid enough. Both Alderin and the Colonel are both ex-UE Navy pilots. They don't have a lot outside of that. You can kind of pick and choose stuff, but you don't have a whole lot to go off of. Like, what backstory does the Colonel have right now? He's from Terra. He's from New Austin, Terra. He's an ex-Navy pilot, and he's the leader of Pick and Shield. There's not a whole lot else right now, but it is something worth thinking about. You have to keep that in mind as the lore continues to develop and we get closer to Persistent Universe. You gotta keep that in the back of mind, because the prior events of your character's life will influence how they behave going forward.
Another thing is, it's not a big deal, but you might want to see if you can make your character a little different. Like, when I first made mine, it was actually very similar, almost identical to Pixley's.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of the same backstory, same history, same wants, the ship. Only very minor differences.
Mm-hmm.
Should we maybe just give, like, the nutshell version of each of our characters?
Well, I mean, I just did that.
Oh. Well, okay, so basically, my character was also in the Navy, though I got out a little bit later than Pixley did. Didn't go straight into Pick and Shield after the Navy, did some minor hauling originally with an Aurora. Lost a friend. Well, yeah, I lost a friend in a pirate raid and I was working with him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more of a blockade, really. That's kind of where the whole anti-pirate sentiment came from.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's about the time I would have upgraded to a 300i.
Mm-hmm.
Because an Aurora wouldn't cut it against that sort of thing. And also, it's time for an upgrade anyway. Keep kind of doing my thing. Bump into Pick and Shield, join it, upgrade to 325A.
Yep.
So, and hopefully I managed to make my character a little bit better off than Pixley's is, so I can pay my rent.
Yeah. And see, that's an interesting difference. Like, there's
yeah,
the money thing. The money thing is a huge difference. Like,
like Pixley wants to be poor.
Well, for now, I mean, obviously the Colonel will drag himself up by the bootstraps and bring Pick and Shield to prominence, but you gotta start low, and I would imagine Alderin's wisdom score would be higher than the Colonel's.
Depending on what it is, I guess.
Well, the money thing, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I'll probably go through and maybe kind of figure everything out one of these days. I actually meant to do that before doing this show, so I'd actually have a little bit more input. So maybe the wisdom bit isn't as good as you think.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well,
we'll see.
Might do it like a really minor revisit to this at some point in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe have some more ideas or...
Yeah, developing... I mean, once we get really solid lore going on, and I would imagine, like, after an episode of 2 of Squadron 42, like, then we would really have stuff to work on and, like, actually be able to give advice. Like, yeah, character backstory is such a huge topic here, and certainly can't be covered in this one episode. Not even remotely.
Yeah, I mean, we've already been going for, what, an hour on this topic alone?
Yeah,
and
probably.
we probably do, like, 3.
Yeah.
Alright, so, yeah.
Alrighty.
Let's keep going.
Yep, moving on.
Then, where are we?
This next bit kind of ties back into attributes and the skills, but, I mean, it is worth thinking of separately. And that's character flaws. Like, interesting characters are flawed. Otherwise, again, you have, like, Mary Stu, Gary Stu type thing going on. And you don't want that. You want interesting characters to roleplay with. Otherwise, you're not telling a good story, and then the role-playing has failed. So the Colonel, his 2 major flaws are that he's not careful with his money, at least currently, and despite his attempts to come across as a nice, good guy, he can be irascible and violent. He gets into a pretty severe fight with pirates, and he ends up capturing one after blowing his ship up. He captures him, brings him on board. I mean, obviously this would not be on board the 3258. This would be later down the line with, like, bringing him on board a colony, like, as a prisoner. Like, it would not be beneath the colonel to slit the guy's throat and then shove him out in an airlock. That is not beneath the colonel. And, you know, that's something he's afraid of. He doesn't like that, and that's going to the next thing. Like, your character has to have fears. Like, everyone's afraid of something. And the colonel's afraid of his own violent nature. And it comes out when he's fighting his enemies. Afterwards, and he's had time to reflect, he'll get in this funky mood where, like, he's like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Having fears is really important. Every character has positives and negatives. You know, you have goals and aspirations, and then you have your flaws and your fears. Things you're good at, things you're bad at. And it's about working through and around these limitations. That's what makes a character interesting. And with an interesting character comes an interesting story, and with an interesting story comes role-playing. It really comes down to that. If in case you haven't gotten anything else from this entire spiel of mine, it's that good role-play is about telling a good story which comes from interesting characters. You gotta have an interesting character. So, yeah. So that's my take on character creation. If you have a neat way you built your character, please feel free to send it and we can discuss it. Maybe you can be on the show to talk about it. I would always happy to have people on the show, either on this show or proper Comm Chatter in character. I'll have some links in the description of either the video or the audio file, like with some links to the Pathfinder source reference document, the SRD, that's d20pfsrd.com, and those links link to stuff about alignment, ability scores, and skills. So it's a really good resource. Anyone who plays Pathfinder these days is going to use that to look up rules and stuff, but it has the basic stuff in it. And again, you don't have to use the mechanical rules, but getting an understanding of how alignment works, what the ability scores mean, what skills mean. Ability scores and skills only really apply if you're doing the pen and paper method. But I mean, if you're going off an archetype or just transplanting your personality into 2944, alignment and the other stuff in that last block, that's certainly still worth going over. You know, make sure you have that. So, Alderin, take it away with this day-ish in Star Citizen history.
This day-ish in Star Citizen history. There was a Caterpillar sale. We had just recently gone to look at the Caterpillar and the Cutlass.
Which we haven't seen too much of them since then, have we?
Yes, I mean, I would actually like to see some more of the Drake ships. I mean, not necessarily because we'll be probably shooting at them a lot, but because I'm willing to bet they'll be quite affordable. But
yeah,
that's more speculation. That's not for today.
Yeah, well, they have interesting designs, that's for sure.
Yes, I actually like the designs a bit.
Yeah. Well, I imagine they're lower priority because, you know, they're probably trying to get ships through the pipeline that are more relevant to Squadron 42 than the Chris's.
And we maintained episode 39. We had just hit 19 million.
Yay.
At 19, we unlocked Know Your Foe with Jane's Fighting Ship Style Manual, free in PDF form to all pledgers. Manage space stations. Players will compete to own and operate a limited number of space stations across the galaxy. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, actually, Wingman and a couple of other citizens were talking about that yesterday at Bar Citizen. They had a really good discussion because, like, there's some major considerations to be taken into account because of instancing. Like, instancing is going to make that really difficult, and like they were having a really good discussion about that. And like seems like Wingman and I would imagine Rob Irving as well are like really grappling with that.
And RSI Museum will air monthly with a new game feature every each time.
How many of those did we get? One?
One? Wasn't that just like Wing Commander? No, that was not even Wing Commander. That was, what, Strike Commander?
Yeah, Strike Commander.
It was that, yeah, it was that. The
F-16 game.
Yeah, it was the then modern air combat.
Well, I mean, technically it is still modern because the F-16 is still very much in service. I would know. My dad flew one until a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more like several years ago now. Anyway.
And at that time, they announced the $21 million stretch goal. Salvage mechanic.
Oh, I forgot that wasn't originally in the design.
Yeah, me too. Salvage isn't an aside, it's a career with its own mechanic. Story tie-ins and universe-shaping endgames. Search the galaxy for a host of valuable and interesting secrets using both flight and FPS components. Discover the secrets of the ancient Hadesians. Hard to say. Locate valuable components and cargo, or go down in history to make as the first to make contact with an entirely new alien race.
Or maybe even find old dilapidated versions of ships.
Yeah.
It's like bookend type thing going on.
In this letter from the chairman, we also saw the first concept art of the female explorer.
Wow, it's already been a year since we saw that?
Yeah, I know, right?
Damn. We still don't have a female player character yet. What the hell?
I'm willing to bet there'll be so much complaints when there is. Mainly around, the chest area.
Yeah.
It won't surprise me. People will either think they're too big, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's why they're holding off, because it's going to be a touchy subject.
Yeah, they'll have to figure out how to do it without pissing a bunch of people off, which will be kind of hard, because that's what people do. They get pissed off at nothing.
Yeah. Legante Kinshadow and I had a really good discussion about that yesterday, actually. I'm not going to go into details, though.
Also, in that letter from the chairman, we had I believe it was the first vote where we decided whether we would keep having stretch goals.
The first of them.
I think, how many have we had now? 3 or 4? I've lost track.
I don't 4 seems like a little bit much. I think, 2 or 3. But, still, it's kind of amusing. We've had it several times now.
Yeah.
Although I think our current solution is good. Just not having it on the front page is, I think, the best compromise.
Yeah. Needless to say, we kept going with an 88% majority.
Well, we were so young and naive back then. I mean, we hadn't even fully funded the game yet. That's amazing, right? It hasn't even been a year since we got the game fully funded.
It's coming up on 2 years since it was announced. Not too much long.
Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, it's only 2 more months until the first anniversary of Comm Chatter.
I know. Crazy.
I know. We haven't even hit 10 episodes yet. As usual, we'd like to thank everyone who made this makes the show possible. CIG, Behavior, Redacted, the CGBot, and the other outsourced places. And then Cinnavin Ryan for inspiring us to do Comm Chatter, and everyone who listens. If you would like to contribute or appear on Comm Chatter or Comm Chatter Off Duty, feel free to send us an email at pickandshield@gmail.com. You don't need to bother shooting us emails in character, if that would just be weird. But
Yeah, just let us know if you want to be on it. It can be either show.
Yeah.
You don't have to be on both of them. You can if you want, but it's not required.
Yeah.
All you really need is a decent microphone.
Yep.
And considering what we got by with before, I think just about anyone can manage.
Yeah, but I feel like our standards can improve. Although, I will happily endorse the Samson Meteor microphone, which is also Senor Microfono. You can find it on Amazon for a pretty reasonable price.
Oh, yeah.
No money just there. I got no money from that. So yeah, please feel free to contribute. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, feel free to leave it on the forum thread or the YouTube comments. If you're on iTunes, feel free to leave a review. I will read those. We haven't gotten any yet at this point, but, we love hearing feedback.
Yeah. And if you don't want to use any of those, feel free to shoot us a message on YouTube or on the RSI forums via private messages.
Yep.
basically, if you can get out at us, go for it.
Yep, basically. So yeah, this is regular Pixley and Alderin signing off.
Have a good day, everyone.